All right, thank you. I'm going to sit it back a little bit. Please make yourself comfortable in a way that will help you to be mindful. So what I mean by that is that you should be comfortable enough to relax, but not so comfortable that you fall asleep. If that makes sense. Hope it does. Angela is currently covering the waiting room, I take it. But after we start meditating, I'll pop my eyes open a little bit to keep an eye on the waiting room so you can meditate. I've already, I'm pretty good here. All right, so settling into your posture, you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze, turning the attention inward. And take a few moments to move the attention through the body and just relax different points in the body. And more generally, just to bring your attention into your body, feeling your body, or relaxing your jaw, releasing the shoulders, softening the belly. And just an overall sense of settling. Thich Nhat Hanh uses a couple images. One is the pebble dropping down in a pond, drifting down to the bottom. Another one is a glass of cloudy water it's been stirred up and then letting it settle. And feeling the breath as the body settles. Even as the body is still, the breath continues to move. What feelings are present right now? You can think of this as the mood or just maybe the energetic state. Emotions are really just energies moving through the mind and body. If we tune into them, not as having meaning or representing anything, but just as a felt experience and breathing with that. And then letting the breath come more into the foreground of your awareness. can feel the breath at the nostrils, the touch sensation of air moving in and out. Or just as movement in the belly, rising and falling. The body naturally breathes. We don't have to do anything to make the body breathe. Awareness too is natural. We just point it towards the breath. This isn't a project or a grasping at the breath, but just a simple, relaxed connection. Just enjoying the natural movement of breath in the body. If we are undistracted, there's a natural calming, settling that happens with mindful breathing. However, if we come to our practice with a lot of energy or stress, some worry or plan in the mind, it can actually be quite difficult to settle on the breath. We might feel it coming and going, but the mind keeps slipping off. So this takes patience, not to fight with the mind, but to be persistent and gently bringing it back each time. And perhaps trying to feel more detail of breath, more subtle elements of breath as a way of strengthening that concentration, interrupting the thoughts. If there are persistent thoughts, just to acknowledge where the mind wants to go. Can be quite revealing. Looking into our own minds, looking into our own thoughts. It's a kind of inventory of the mind. Keep coming back. Little by little, that persistence weakens the habitual energy of our thoughts. And the attention finally settles with the breath. Sorry, that was a bell faux pas. The cough drop bag was leaning against the bells and it ruined the tone. About 2 more minutes, I was going to conk out. It's a good thing we ran out of time there. It's a little too relaxed. So once again, welcome. Nice to see everyone. Verging on spring here, although Northern California has banned seasons. We've decided that they're not necessary. It's just one day at a time here. One season at a time each day. Could be anything. So, yes. So, talk a little bit about, before I get into this little section of burning desire, which starts on page 8, just the last 2 pages of the chapter. I guess the last 2 pages of the introduction. So the basic structure of the book, besides the introduction, is to there's 2 main sections, which are in the subtitle. There's the section called Dharma God and the section called the Path of Recovery. And the section called Dharma God is essentially going through major elements of Buddhism and defining them and seeing how they can qualify as higher powers. So that was, one really the kind of the major project of the book was to give people a different way to think about higher power with the 12 steps, and particularly with step 3. And then the second section is called the Path of Recovery. And here is very intentional. I chose to just write a chapter on each of the steps that mentions God or higher power, and then try to relate that to the definitions of Dharma God that I gave in the first section. So it makes for a little bit of an oddity in that we only go through 6 steps. There are only 6 steps that mention God or higher power: steps 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 11. And so when I got to the end of the introduction, I guess I kind of felt that I needed to say something sort of about step 1, because it seemed like sort of odd, sort of disembodied steps to not mention step 1. So as you might know, step 1 says we admitted we were powerless over, depends on your addiction, but over alcohol in the case of alcoholics, that our lives had become unmanageable. So I just have this brief piece here that's kind of addressing step 1 that I'll go over tonight. So I'll read some of this, maybe a bunch of it, because it's pretty short. The logic of the 12 steps is that if we are powerless over our addiction, as step 1 says, then we are going to need some other higher power or God to overcome the addiction. But what exactly does powerless mean in this context? The easiest claim to make about powerlessness is that once we start drinking or drugging or gambling, eating, acting out sexually, etc., we can't control what happens. This was true of me. Sometimes I would have a few beers, smoke a joint, and go to bed. But many times I would start drinking and not stop until I blocked out or passed out. Anytime I started drinking, it was a crapshoot. I didn't know how I would react to alcohol, which is why I can say I was powerless over it. My addiction to marijuana worked differently. Pot doesn't cause blackouts. Blackouts are the same kind of binging. Once you're high, there's not much point in smoking a lot more until it wears off, because you won't continue to get more high like you do with booze. The way pot worked for me is that I just wanted to be high all the time. I tried to control my use and preserve my stash by pacing my smoking through the day. So for 9 years, I was essentially stoned all the time. When I eventually started to cut back, what I found was that if I went for a few days without smoking, the craving diminished. But as soon as I got high again, the craving came back, and the next day I wanted to get high some more. This was addictive in the classic sense that once I took the drug, I craved it over and over. I was powerless. Both of these patterns point to the kind of classic powerlessness that takes over once we consume this substance. But I don't think that's the limit of powerlessness. The big book, the Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about the, quote, phenomenon of craving, unquote. Many times powerlessness seems to start even before we get high, at the point when this phenomenon takes over. When I look at my own experience with addiction, this seems to be how it worked. There were times when I would start thinking about drinking or using, and the idea would become more and more alluring until I felt that I had no choice, that I couldn't live without acting on that craving. What this pattern tells me is that powerlessness starts before I pick up the drink or drug. Once an obsession is in full swing, it's tough to turn it back. Somewhere in there, depending, I suppose, upon the individual and the strength of the craving, we cross the line into having no choice anymore, into being compelled to act, into powerlessness. I think it's easier to avoid actually taking a drug than it is to avoid this craving. Drinking and using are actions, and we have the most control over our actions, far more than we have over our thoughts and feelings. Seeing this pattern, then, it gives me some idea about how to approach the problem of addiction. I need to avoid obsession, find ways to keep it from arising, to counteract the power of addiction. If powerlessness represents our dark side, our destructive impulses, then higher power represents the healthy and sane part of us. The steps are trying to help us to reconnect with our sanity, just as step 2 says. Admitting we are powerless and need a higher power is only acknowledging that these conflicting impulses live inside us. The spiritual tools of the 12 steps in the Dharma can help us to cultivate the power to turn toward sanity, toward the light. So that's the end of the introduction. And I do think this point about obsession is really, it's kind of, to me, it's the most important point about this little section of the book. The idea that the real problem isn't necessarily the craving as it is the obsession, and maybe there's not that much of a difference between the two, but there's like a power, a momentum that starts that seems unstoppable. That's where I think the powerlessness really lies, and so, I think that our recovery, it says again in the big book, it depends upon the daily maintenance of our spiritual condition, and why I think we need to daily maintain our spiritual condition is so that we don't get into a condition out of which an obsession arises. So a lot of the self-care and recovery is to not so much stop us from drinking, but stopping us from getting to that point where we're going to, get overwhelmed with that obsession, that compulsion. So it really, to me, that points to really the work, and And to me, it is really about taking care of ourselves on these multiple levels. Well, taking care of ourselves physically, because we know that fatigue and stress, you know, hunger, anger, lonely, tired, you know, these things make us more vulnerable. And, you know, it's kind of like that part of us lives there, you know, I mean, it lives inside us, and it's being sort of controlled and caged by caged isn't the right word, but it's being diffused, I think, by the healthy feelings and behaviors. So we take care of ourselves physically, can't be ignored. Take care of ourselves emotionally, so that when anger and loneliness, you know, arise, that we respond to them with care, that we don't feed them, and that we don't let them take over. Very tricky, right? With certain emotions, we can't just, you know, snap our fingers and make our emotions go away, or, you know, I mean, one of the reasons we drank and used was to get rid of feelings. So, you know, that kind of problem solving doesn't work for us anymore. So there's a certain degree of self-care that might be, oh, I need to talk to a friend, or maybe I need to talk to a therapist, or, you know, maybe I need to go to a meeting, and the kind of stuff that we do, or meditate, you know. But there's also, as we know, a certain amount of having to learn to live with emotional distress. You know, we can't assume, and we can't allow our recovery to depend upon a constant state of emotional comfort. You know, we can't expect that to be there. It's just not realistic. Life isn't like that. And I think that, you know, part of the, you know, I think significant part of addiction, of being an addict, of living the life of an addict, of sort of being drawn into that, is an inability to live with emotional distress, with agitation, with disturbance, with inner pain. You know, that doesn't sound like a great. I mean, I don't know. You know, I don't. It sounds maybe like I'm judging all addicts as being emotionally immature, and maybe I am. But that, if I am, it's because I'm judging myself, and I'm sure that's not true of every addict. I'm sure there are other reasons why people become addicts, but that certainly was key for me, was an inability to just live with my own difficult emotions. And that, again, doesn't mean I have to just, like, you know, grit my teeth. And, you know, there's a lot I can do. And of course, it turns out that not drinking and using actually made me more capable of being with difficult emotions. You know, the draining quality of being hungover, or, you know, just being wasted, makes me much less capable of managing emotions. And so that becomes a self-perpetuating, you know, habit then. You know, my fatigue and my you know, state of you know, just being burnt out, then triggers more craving, more of a need to stimulate some positive feeling through drinking and using. But, you know, even sober, you know, pain comes up, things happen in life. We're talking with somebody today who's going through a painful divorce. You know, that happens in sobriety, right? And and she's not drinking. She didn't drink, but she's depressed. And it's like, yeah, of course you are, right? And that's another thing, right? I think that, again, I don't want to, overgeneralize, but one of the things that can happen is that we think that there's something wrong with us because we're having certain feelings, and we thereby sort of paint a picture of ourselves, and we make it worse for ourselves instead of saying, oh, divorce is painful. No wonder I'm depressed. We go, I shouldn't be feeling this. What's wrong with me? Or even you could come up with the story, oh, what, it's my fault that my marriage failed or something, those kind of unfortunate self-blame. Oh, well, this is, of course, where meditation and mindfulness comes in, where it can really help us to get this, to me, mindfulness, part of its purpose and part of its manifestation is as a reality check. It kind of wakes us up to like, okay, because it's this very objective way of looking at things. It's not taking a stance or a particular viewpoint. It's just saying, what is happening? And what is the context of this happening? Let me look at this picture. What does this feel like? What does it look like? And we can sometimes see, oh, this thought that's just a thought that doesn't really make sense. So we could say, so we take care of ourselves physically, we take care of ourselves, psychologically, emotionally. And of course, with the self-care that goes with that, with the many forms of self-care. And then we say spiritual, again, the big book refers to the disease of alcoholism as physical, mental, and spiritual. And it's kind of hard for me to distinguish exactly the difference between emotional and spiritual, but it is to some extent the place in which we step out of the line of the personal into the more universal and try to kind of have this view. But it also has this realistic view, what we call right view in Buddhism. But it does also have this component of looking for a positive attitudes, guidance. I mean, it's interesting to call the Eightfold Path spiritual, because it's right view, which is a way of seeing the world. Okay, seems kind of practical. Right intention, it's just like what's behind our actions. Right action are the precepts. Right speech, right livelihood. These are all very kind of practical things. Right effort, right mindfulness. I guess mindfulness is spiritual. Yeah. A lot of people think of it as psychological. Right concentration. So those are mental, mind training, they call it. And certainly there's a kind of blending here. But here in this process of mind training, which we would call, I suppose, spiritual, there is a discipline, a discipline in which we start to, when we say train the mind, the first thing we're trying to do with the mind is actually stabilize it in the sense of stabilizing our attention. And this is what mindfulness and concentration, when combined, do. So instead of the mind constantly, drifting away and getting distracted and getting agitated, we're able to hold it in one place. And this has a variety of really beneficial effects. As the mind becomes more stabilized, more calm, then naturally the disturbances are quieted. It said that concentration or meditative concentration, samadhi, cools the emotions. We can, when I hear that, I always think of, a Buddhist monk, the image of the serene, equanimous person sitting in their robes, just, undisturbed. And we can have that for ourselves. We don't have to put on robes. We don't have to become monks. We just have to engage in this training. And that, it's very striking. It's striking to me. I'm sure that many of you have had experiences like this. When your mind state changes, and obviously meditation is a way of intentionally changing your mind state. And when your mind state changes, and then all of a sudden you see things differently, and the things that you had been upset about or had been viewing them in a certain way, all of a sudden you see them very differently. It's like you wake up in the morning, you're like, how did I get caught? What was I doing caught in that, right? We get caught in these emotional cycles. And this practice helps us to keep our mind state more balanced, which keeps us with right view. Right view is just seeing reality clearly, not getting lost in the fears and the resentments and the opinions that just send us spiraling off. So it's quite interesting, really, to see this. It's quite remarkable, in fact, I would say, that instead of, this is key recovery idea, it's an inside job. Instead of thinking I have to change the world out there in order to be okay, to realize that I can change the world in here to become okay. And then all of a sudden, all that out there becomes less disturbing. I'm less susceptible to the agitation because I've trained my mind. I've been very struck by this lately, frankly, and I've talked about this, that I've been working a lot with mindfulness of breathing, which, I think I learned something about that 40 years ago. But it really making more effort. And it's really striking to me how it's affected my whole sort of mental state day by day. So I really recommend it. I recommend that you try to be mindful of your breathing whenever you can think of it. I was listening to Bhikkhu Bodhi, the wonderful Buddhist monk and translator, scholar, teacher. He's talking about the Anapanasati Sutta, which I've been talking about with you guys, the sutta on mindful breathing in and out. And, and I always, listen to Bhikkhu Bodhi, and believe me, you learn something every time. And I've been listening to him for a long time and listened to many, many talks. So he's talking about this word, anapana, okay, which I've always heard it translated as it means breathing in and breathing out. But then he says, the word pana is Pali for the word prana. And he says, it doesn't, when the Buddha is talking about anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, he's talking about more than just how we think of breathing. Because in the Hindu, let's not even say Hindu, in the Indian system, prana, the breath, pranayama, probably all familiar with that term from yoga, has it moves throughout the body. There are streams of pranayama energy that move throughout the body, not just in the lungs or the heart and lungs or the organs, that it goes throughout the body. And so that when you are doing mindful breathing and you're breathing fully, you are actually doing something really beyond just being aware of your breathing, that you're actually working on this other level, this energetic level. And it made me think immediately, and many of you have sat retreats with Greg, it immediately made me think of Qigong. And if you don't know Greg, he teaches Qigong with me, but maybe you've learned Qigong from someone else. It's a practice of movement that's tied in with breath. The breath is meant to move with each movement. There's inhalation and there's exhalation. There's inhalation and there's exhalation, right? So Qigong is the Chinese version, right? It's basic. It's talking about the same thing as pranayama in terms of like using breath on this energetic level that's working, on our, and pranayama. I didn't finish that sentence, but because I want to restart it. Qigong is, I think, even more explicit in that it points to this idea that our bodies are these fields of energy, and that movement and breath influence that energy, and that intentional breath and intentional movements have positive, healthful, and mental and psychological and spiritual impacts on us. So it bringing more intentional breathing into your life, bringing more mindful breathing into your life is not just like, oh, I'm supposed to be a good Buddhist who's mindful and I'm paying attention to my breath. It's actually this way of kind of imbibing in health and positive energy throughout your day. Because one of the things that happens as soon as you're mindful of your breath is you naturally take some deeper breaths. And the breath and the body naturally becomes more calm. And the mind naturally becomes quieter. And the emotions naturally cool off. And we all know this. That's why we say, take a breath, or when a kid is upset, count to 10, breathe, that's what we're all doing. We all know this. It's like so basic that we don't need to, have it learn pranayama and qigong to know it. It's just like breathe. But maybe it helps. Maybe it'll be a little bit more of an inspiration for you to work with this, to really start to see when you wake up in the morning before you get out of bed. Stop. See if you can remember to stop, because it's all about remembering, right? Sati, mindfulness is to remember. Remember to stop. Oh, before I get out of bed, let me take a mindful breath. Let me take 3 mindful breaths. Okay, now let me feel my feet on the floor. Let me stand up. Let me start to move. And then keep checking in whenever you can remember. So that went on for a while. Thanks. Thanks, Angela, for putting in various information in the chat for those who want to support my teaching. There's information about giving dana, and also the upcoming retreat, May 15th to the 20th in Northern California. You can contact Greg, actually, is doing the registration. But there's an email address on the flyer. If you click on the link there, that should show you the flyer. Oh, that's the retreat letter. That's sneaky. Should you have, what is the retreat letter? I don't even know the retreat letter. Whoa, that's complicated. So you're taking people one step further.
Well, the interest letter has, just more information. And then the flyer has different information.
Oh, did you put the flyer up too?
Yes.
Okay. You're forgiven then.
Thank you.
You're always forgiven. You have a presidential pardon that's retro, and what's the it goes into the future as well, not just backward, but future too. Anyway, if you're interested. Oh, and also we do have this list for people who would like to be in touch with other people in the group. And it kind of, since we don't have like formal like sponsorship and stuff, it's something like if you'd like to connect to an individual, if you go onto that list, you'll see that people, many people tell a little bit about themselves, about their recovery, and and their availability to be of support, and that's always helpful. So, my dears, I've pretty much used up all the time, which doesn't mean I'm going to leave, but if anybody needs to leave, we officially call this 7 to 8, but I'll hang out for a little while if anybody wants to share anything or say hi or correct me. Always happy to hear from folks. Somehow I got from powerlessness to pranayama, so who knows. Hey, Debbie, hi.
Hi there. Thank you so much for landing on pranayama. I do enjoy that practice in yoga. I just wanted to share, to support everything you've shared this evening, that I did that 14-day meditation retreat recently. And I was compelled halfway through, I cheated and used something digital to take my blood pressure.
Oh.
My blood pressure, it's not out of whack, but it's kind of on the high end of normal. So I just kind of monitor it once in a while. But we always hear about meditation and blood pressure. My blood pressure was down 12 to 15 points.
Wow.
On day 5. And I attribute that to, number one, doing a lot more meditation practice than during a normal day in my everyday life. But the other part was being mindful with everything I was doing throughout the day.
Yeah.
Being mindful of when I would stand up. How many times did I change a position? How is my breathing now? Being mindful of how I walked down the stairs, or how I did the dishes, after preparing my very mindful, attentive, paying attention to preparing my meal.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, it's so real, and it's interesting, we can hear about studies, but it's really nice when we experience it ourselves, and then you really, it's just another, yeah.
Very nice. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, if we could just lose weight by meditating, we'd have it all covered.
I did not eat or watch TV for 14 nights in a row.
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Without even trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that for a year, but it was a side benefit from what the intention of the practice was. So it wasn't even an issue. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's really interesting how when you're sitting like that, a lot of the things that normally entice you just don't anymore. It's kind of that disenchantment. You're just not that really interested. It all seems kind of like the subtlety of mind you get to is so sweet. There's no real need for that kind of a gross activity. That's great. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks for sharing about that. Mike?
Yeah. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for the class tonight. It was really, really interesting. I really liked what you were saying about the mindfulness and trying to concentrate on that more. And sometime I'd be curious to hear what Qigong you do in the morning, because Greg told me you had developed this kind of a short routine you do every morning. So maybe you can share that sometime.
I've been terrible about it. I have not been doing it lately, so I cannot tell a lie.
Maybe Greg built that up too much.
I might have, there might have been a time, you know what I'm saying? Like I have limited, like what do you call it? Limited discipline and I apply most of it to meditation. And then, then my discipline slips around everything else. But when I did do, what he's talking about is, I don't know if you've done Qigong with him?
Yeah.
So he's got the three warm-up things. Right. Those are the ones that I like. The first one starts with, the hands on the dantian, and you go breathing in, breathing out, and you do that. And then there's the hands coming up and going down like this. And then there's going like this, out, around. So those are my favorites.
Yeah, I like those too. Those are good. Hey, so what I wanted to talk about though was I kind of had some big news happen. My brother, I normally don't talk about this too much, but in this group anyway, but my brother's been he's had a real hard time with his addictions, and it's been going on for a while, and it's been rough, and he had a kind of a real bottom here in December, and he kind of got guilted into starting some 12-step, and he did that for a little while, and then it kind of spun out of control again. But today he just checked himself into rehab. So
wow.
Yeah, that was huge.
Good.
That was really huge. And it, you were talking a little bit about ourselves and our ability to handle stress in our lives. And this has been just something I've really had to work on for the last 2 years for me, because, I've wanted for him to get into recovery so bad.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one kind of in his life that is in recovery. And I've felt like such a, need to help him with that. And it's been hard not to get codependent on it and get really wrapped around it. And about a year ago, he got in trouble and went to the ER and went to the psychiatric ward and got out of the psychiatric ward by agreeing to go to rehab, and then checked himself out 3 days into rehab. I mean, it's been wow. A real struggle, but anyway, this time it's his idea and he went in. And I guess what I was going to say with me though was, you were talking about the ability to not have good, to deal with the stresses of life.
Yeah.
And that seems like one of the most important things I've learned in recovery is the ability to handle negative emotions.
Right.
And that's one thing that I've gotten out of recovery, and this has helped my Buddhist practice has helped a lot with that too. So anyway, some good news today. And
great. And, how old is your brother?
He's just turned 50.
Okay. Good for him. It's mysterious, what it takes. But we also know, like, it's remarkable how much change can happen when people turn that corner. I mean, everything can change. So I really hope he sticks with it and that it really takes this time. Good luck.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I kind of think his little bout that he did in AA for a couple months there, I think really ruined his drinking.
Right. Yeah. And as you say, like that, when it's your choice to go in, that makes all the difference, because it has to be something you want. It's not something you can do for anybody else or because someone else tells you to. But when you want it, then you can, that's going to be the driving force for it. So that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that good news, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me.
So thank you all for showing up. And as they say, for showing up for yourselves. I will be back here Tuesday. Sometimes it seems like I'm teaching all the time, and then sometimes it seems like I'm hardly ever teaching. Time is, relative, and perception of time is particularly relative. So right now it seems like maybe not so much, but I hope that everybody is you're taking care of yourselves in all the ways you need to, and getting support where you need it. And I am available to people. If you need to contact me through my website, you just click on contact and you can email me. So be well, stay safe. Good night.